Service innovation is a topic I enjoy talking about and teaching. In fact, when I was at Singapore Institute of Technology, I actually developed an entire semester-long course based on service innovation and delivered it, and I already enjoyed it, learned a lot from it. So I'm going to just condense that down to one lecture here for us, and then we can expand on it in our class discussions. But I think the key to understand about service innovation when we're talking about our focus on service is in the hospitality industry in particular, is that it's a combination of the service delivery processes, things that we talked about earlier in Gap 2, right? Some of those processes that companies have, how we deliver the service. Even later on we're going to talk about service recovery process, plus technology. When those two come together, that's where service innovation comes in. So it's service delivery systems plus technology leads us to service innovation. Now, if you look at sources of innovation, where they happen, we have internal and external sources. On the internal side, unexpected occurrences, incongruities, process needs, industry and market changes. On the external side, demographics, changes in perceptions, new knowledge. So let's go through and talk about a little of those and try and relate them to the hospitality industry in particular. Let's look at internal sources first. Unexpected occurrences. Okay, this is probably the richest source of innovation, where something that you saw didn't seem to be quite right, and therefore maybe it was neglected most of the time, and maybe you can come up with a new solution. All right, so it may be exploitation of unexpected success, right? Exploitation of unexpected success. Marriott and airline catering. What happened there, if you don't know the history on this, is that passengers were getting on flights from the Washington Airport, Washington National Airport in those days, and Marriott had a hotel and restaurant close by, and what people were doing is they'd go there and they would buy a boxed lunch to take it on board the plane because they didn't have airline catering. Now, in the U.S., as some of you may know, there's really no airline catering anymore, but we know internationally there certainly is. And that was begun by airline. That was an idea that Mr. J.W. Marriott was credited with in terms of starting airline catering. Other unexpected failures. Walt Disney didn't like the amusement parks that he went to. He didn't think they were right, so he created Disneyland in 1955. Kemmons Wilson, the founder of Holiday Inns, was traveling down interstate highways, and he didn't like the inconsistency from one motel stop to another down the highway, and he started creating Holiday Inns, where that sign that you see right there on the lower right hand corner became the trademark for Holiday Inns, and they were basically highway off the interstate, or even before interstate, off of the U.S. highway system. Incongruities, okay, the state of not fitting in its location or situation. Something didn't work, right? So incongruity with the logic of a process. In other words, it doesn't make sense that we can't necessarily come up with a better idea. There must be a better way to do it. Same thing between economic realities, okay? Maybe we're trying to save money, or we're trying to do something more effectively and efficiently. Or between expectations and results. Okay, so maybe there's something that isn't happening that people are expecting, and there might be something to happen on that basis. And I credit one example of that, of one of the largest hotel companies in the world today in terms of number of properties, the economy brand in mainland China of Green Tree Inns. Alex Xu is the founder and the CEO. He's a friend of mine. I first met him when they had 35 hotels in Shanghai, and now, as I say, they're one of the largest hotel groups in the world. And what he did was he came up with a concept for an economy brand where it could be done very efficiently, and most everything was done through technology. In fact, he's a graduate of the University of Southern California in Los Angeles, and he was an engineering guy. He had been a developer of homes. He had built homes and subdivisions, and he took the money that he had there and he went back to China, where he was originally from. He grew up rather poor in Shandong province, and he decided to take that technology and put it into managing the economy brands. So he saw something there, and he's been successful with it. He also owns some other hotels in the U.S. today, too. Process needs. Okay. Innovations created to support other processes and products, something that's a missing link in that. So hotel automation for check-in and check-out or contactless keys, that's a missing link. And boy, it's a critical link to us right now in this COVID-19 situation that we're in, that we'll talk a little bit more about in terms of that contactless key aspect. So the process that was needed was a smoother checkout, smoother check-in, reducing the queues, all of that. So they came up originally with the idea of TV check-in. Okay, now we have TV, we have it from your phone directly. So today's advances, check in and out via mobile, contactless room key, all of those came from a missing link to make the process work more efficiently. And if you haven't used those before, they're very effective, and I personally prefer that approach and did even before COVID-19. Industry and market changes, all right, structures that may happen overnight, things that happen as a result of what we're dealing with right now in terms of distancing factor. That could be something that we're dealing with here. But structural changes due to growth of the industry, established companies are more defensive here and less attacking, so the innovators come into play. Great example of this, TripAdvisor, right? Peer-to-peer reviews. They began sharing photos in 2000, and look where they are today, 20 years later. So it was something that, well, consumers wanted and needed, but didn't really know that they wanted and needed. And they saw the changes happening. They saw this thing going online, and therefore they've become a major player in the business today. Those are internal sources. Now let's look at external sources. Demographic changes. Outsources of innovation and opportunities, things that no longer they're going to be effective doing them internally. There's something that you maybe have to bring in from outside. Maybe it's more effective economically to do that. Sometimes it's because demographics are the most reliable aspect in terms of what we're looking at to make changes. Changes occur in the population, income levels, in other words, age ranges and so on. Your generation coming into play wanted a different kind of hotel. They didn't want to just go to the typical big box hotel where every room looks the same. They wanted something a little different. So voila, here comes some innovators who looked at what was there. They went back to old hotels and they started remodeling. They went to banks and they went to art institutions and so on like that, and they recreated the boutique hotel aspect being unique. And they're very popular with your generation and the generation before you because there's more authenticity, their uniqueness, personal. Two brands that are well known for developing this in the concept in the U.S., Kimpton, which started in San Francisco with Bill Kimpton but is now a part of IHG, and Morgan's Hotel Group, which started in New York. Now, that's also a part of SBE today, so two of them have actually merged in with other organizations, but they are the two founding companies, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast of the United States. There's a lot of argument about who came first. Changes in perception, okay? The glass is half full or the glass is half empty. Which is it? So we look at healthy menus. That's an example here of organic food choices. You know, we see today plant-based burgers and so on being in there. So rather than try to fight that with what you have, say, okay, let's see if that's what people want. Maybe we'll make changes. So here you see an example of the delightful menu by McDonald's and the McWraps and so on. I'm not sure that you have that in McDonald's in the Philippines. I actually haven't seen it in the McDonald's in the U.S., but it's a concept that they tried. New knowledge, okay? Bright ideas, something coming up that doesn't exist today. So innovations based on bright ideas, right? Those are the largest number, but they're also the ones that have the greatest potential for failure. So they're hard to predict their success. They can be kind of vague and elusive. Sometimes people think, well, that's a crazy idea, that's never going to work, and it ends up working. Other times you think, well, it sounds like it's going to work. Well, it works for me, but it's not going to work for you, and it fades away. But so we need to practice entrepreneurship here in order to make that happen. And entrepreneurs oftentimes realize that everything they do doesn't come out right the first time. I think it's Dyson who invented the Dyson vacuum cleaner and others from there. He had all kinds of different ideas that he came up with before he actually came and became successful with that. Society needs innovation, ambition, ingenuity. So we increased the patent fee. It could be harmful if we do that. If we make it more difficult for people to patent things so that other people copy them, what we need is something where we've got a uniqueness that we can develop from there. And the biggest thing about new knowledge today has been the smartphone. I think the smartphone and apps have created more new knowledge and new aspects of things than any single invention in our history, is my opinion. And I think that there's far more to come with this in terms of how development will happen in these areas, particularly from Apple and Samsung, Huawei, other major developers in this area. Let's look at some basic principles of innovation, the do's, okay? Begin with analysis of opportunities. Go out, look, ask questions. Innovation to be effective has to be simple and focused. Effective innovations start very small sometimes, aiming at leadership. That's where we're trying to go. Now today, by the way, in terms of those do's, a lot of things that are developed in the high-tech field or in the Silicon Valley in California come out of people developing something and then before it ever makes a profit, selling it to the major players out there, the Googles and the Amazons and so on in the world in order to use it. They end up making a fortune out of that, and they actually never made any profits. They never actually did anything except develop something that works. So the don't do is don't get too clever. It can be too complicated. You have to make it simple, right? So you're not to diversify too quickly and make too many things at once. So stick with what works and stay with it. And not to innovate for the future, innovate for today, okay, so that people can use it now, not something they see down the road. You can develop the next generation aspect once you've got the first one. So 3 conditions. Innovation is work. It's a lot of hard work. Yet to succeed, innovators must build on their strengths, and innovation is an effect in economy and the society. Okay, so it's got to be a part of the culture that is being supported here. So the conservative innovator, well, they're successful to the extent that they can define risks and can find them. So looking at those principles, being very specific about it, I read through those because I think it's important to be able to recognize that. And I hope that maybe some of you want to think innovations in the future. Certainly you're going to be doing it for your projects in this class. So what it needs work, as I said. It requires knowledge, ingenuity, and a focus. Innovators rarely just work in one area. Thomas Edison developed more than just the light bulb out there. If you have diligence, persistence, and commitment, you can get away with the lack of talent, ingenuity, and knowledge. You can still succeed. Service innovation success factors. Okay, service has to be distinct in value to the customer and have more than 3 times those that do have more than 3 times the success rate than just the Me Too services. In other words, just developing something that's better than what's already out there has less chance of succeeding than defining something that's distinctive in terms of its value to someone else. And TripAdvisor was an example of that. There are many spin-offs of others that have tried to do similar things like that, and the result is that they haven't been as successful. So you have to get confidence. You have to be a unique idea, and you have to have the courage to act. Key points. Now, in developing a service innovation, some of you may have heard of this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but there's a concept called design thinking. I happen to think that it's a good way to at least get some of your thoughts put in place, and they're basically 5 principles. First, it has to be user-centered. So you have to be able to look at the users, and what you do here is you go out and you observe. You go out and observe what goes on. You see what practices are happening, and you see what the services are, what people are using and what they don't use. And then you co-create it with those stakeholders. You get their input and so on. Then you work on sequencing it so that it can be visualized and put into actions so that you can see how it improves that. Then you have to do an evidencing stage, which is the intangible services could be visualized in terms of physical artifacts. So you have to put the physical thing, what is it you're going to create and how is it going to be done, and what are the processes, essentially the processes that are going to get it done. And then it has to be able to work in the environment that's actually being considered. So those are the basic 5 principles. Again, it makes a very good multiple choice question. Now, I'm going to show you, well, I'm going to show you when it clicks. This is a link to Starbucks Shanghai. Now, I'd like you to, I'm going to put a separate link in ELMS for you to go to. I'm not going to play it in this video because there might be copyright violations if I put that into YouTube, and I don't want that to happen. So I want you to go to it, take a look at this particular video. And what it is, it's about this new Starbucks that they build in Shanghai. I've been there. It's incredible. I mean, now they're roasting coffee and so on. Now, I've also been to the original Starbucks roaster in Seattle, where my daughter lives, and I really like that. But when I saw Shanghai, they have so many different things there. They have tea there, they have different food there, they have all kinds of stuff, and it's really, it's not only innovated, it's an attraction. People actually go to it. So I want you to see that, see what can be done. Now, hotel technology and service innovation. Let's talk a little bit more specific about that. In hotel technology, we have things like apps, okay, guest services and employees. We have apps for concierge aspect of things. We have apps now that will let you check in and check out. And then you have in the guest rooms, you have all kinds of technology being used in the guest rooms today. Much of it started with the TV, but the TV is more of a monitor today. And the touchless kind of things that we're trying to do, you have more and more of that happening. You have AI being used. You have like the Amazon Alexas and the Siris in the rooms to be able to control various things. In the hotel operations side, in terms of the staff operating, you have various systems for front desk, in terms of automating their housekeeping and the communication between them, which is critical. The restaurants and how the restaurants function. There are many different kinds of operational kind of things that have happened there. Now, and let me just complete these. Robots and autonomous vehicles. I've seen these robots going up to the guest rooms and delivering, room service, for example. Now, I'll tell you a funny story. When the hotel opened in Singapore, the Yotel opened in Singapore, I went over to take a look at it, and they had these robots sitting in the lobby, and I said, so how are the robots working? They said, well, they're a great concept, but we have a bit of a problem. I said, it works off of Wi-Fi. So it works very fine. It works fine in the lobby, but when it gets into the elevator or the lift, it loses its Wi-Fi. So it gets to the floor, the door's open, it doesn't know how to come out. So you have to go up and bring it out. So they were working on that at the time I was there. Hopefully they fixed that. Autonomous vehicles. Again, going back to Singapore, I know that Marina Bay Sands has had some real challenges with regards to how they parked cars and valet parking in terms of the spaces and so on. They started using autonomous vehicles to transport the valet parkers back and forth. And of course, social technology, which we'll go more into. I think these are the areas for your projects that you need to think about in terms of the areas that might be relevant to them. Again, I'm going to show you two links here, which I will post separately in the ELMS for the class, for Marriott Innovation Labs, where they're basically going to your generation and they're trying to find out what works and what doesn't. And they've developed these hotel rooms and spaces to do the design thinking, so that we've been talking about in terms of developing new things. Now let's talk about social technology. That's its own unique entity out there and something you know very well. We have so many different alternatives in terms of communication today. Wherever you might be, whether you're in the Philippines, whether you're in China, whether you're in the US, Europe, whatever it may be in the process, you have so many different kind of things out there that go far beyond just Facebook and Twitter. You have LinkedIn, of course, you have Instagram, Snapchat, all of those kind of things that are out there. I think all of these have great potential when we come to the issues of what you're working on in the innovations in your projects, for example. And just to give you a little bit of a rundown on what's the use of these, if you look at the Facebook friends aspect in terms of the numbers that were looked at here. Now this was a couple of years ago, but I think that the trends are still similar. You look at the millennials have 250, Gen X 200. You get down to my generation, about 50. Now I'm an exception, and I welcome you to connect with me on Facebook too, for that matter. And then you look over to the right, and here, let me put the cursor over here if I can get it there. Okay, to the generations of selfies. Again, look at how many more selfies come from your generation and my generation, and then my parents' generation. It wasn't exactly their thing, if you will. However, I've always said my mother got very good at technology, and it didn't even exist when she was around. And for me, you have to go back to, I'm dating myself now. In my college days, a computer was a building. That building was torn down as the administration building now. Twitter has obviously been a major factor in creating all kinds of things from a social standpoint. Some of it now in the U.S., certainly we all know worldwide about the challenges we have with the political aspect on Twitter. But when we're talking about communicating new things and new innovations, Twitter can be an excellent source, as it's very popular. Recent article of the publication Hotel Business was all about technology in the new normal, or what I call the next normal. What's there? That's your job. That's what you're looking at. What are the implications? How will your projects tell that story? What is it that needs to happen? And I don't mean here in terms of a new cleaning product, a new cleaning technology. I'm talking about how that's going to improve the service. So if that's a different way to do it that makes it more effective for the guest, that's what it's all about. And here are your discussion questions for our group that's working on this particular lecture, and we'll look forward to talking to you about those. And again, I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say about it, and I'm really looking forward to what you do on your projects, because I want you to be very creative in this area. It's something I really enjoy myself personally. Thank you.